Okay, let's get started. My name is Timothea Pham, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a program officer on the communities team at the Mass Cultural Council. I co-manage the Creative Experiences program along with my colleagues Kaylin King and Amy Chu, and we are delighted to have you here today to learn about the fiscal year 26 cycle of creative experiences. So some housekeeping and meeting norms before we get started. Starting with captioning and ASL interpretation. Live captioning is presented by Erica Cook, and ASL interpretation is provided by Suzanne Terrio and Kinsey Williamson. Service providers are from Partners Interpreting. If you would like to follow the captions of this presentation, please click on the fullest caption icon on the bottom of the screen. If you would like to follow the captions in a separate device or new window, you can follow the link displayed on the slide that my colleagues will also be posting in the chat. If you need help accessing those captions or interpretations, please type a message in the Q&A box so we can assist. Images on the following slides are photos that illustrate the width and breadth of Mass Cultural Council funding and will not individually be described. So for translations and alternative services, Mass Cultural Council is happy to offer alternative formats, auxiliary aids, translation, interpretation, and other services necessary so that any individual can participate in Mass Cultural Council's programs and services. My colleague will include the contact information for our Access and Inclusion Program Officer, Charles Baldwin. To facilitate your request in a timely manner, please contact us at least 3 weeks before any Mass Cultural Council event or grant deadline. For this info session, we asked for the purpose of question management that everyone utilize the Q&A feature in Zoom rather than using the chat. You can find the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If there is time at the end, we will read aloud the FAQs from the Q&A and respond to any remaining questions. We do ask that everyone try to keep their questions relevant. Next slide. So these are our presenters for today. We are not visible on camera as we want to be sure that the ASL interpreter is highlighted and able to be seen prominently at all times. Because we are not visible, each presenter will do a brief visual description and identify themselves before speaking. As I said before, my name is Timothea. For a brief description, I am a 30-something Asian woman with long brown hair and wearing a black jacket. Our other presenters today are Kaylin King and Amy Chu. So Kaylin, please introduce yourself, and then Amy, would you please introduce yourself afterwards?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kaylin King. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a program officer on the organizations team and part of the creative experiences team. For a visual description, I am a 30-something white woman with shoulder-length blonde hair wearing a royal blue jacket.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Pugh. I'm a program officer on the Creative Youth Development / Education team. And my pronouns are she, hers. I'm a young Asian American woman in her 20s with shoulder length black hair, and I'm wearing a floral print shirt.
Thank you. Next slide. For today's info session, let's take a look at what's on our agenda for today's presentation. First, we'll dive into a program overview and key dates. Then we will be able to discuss eligibility. Following that, we'll delve into the review process and funding priorities. Then we'll take a little time to screen share and walk through the application itself. Finally, we'll open the floor for any questions and answers you may have. This information session will be available on our agency's YouTube page. It is in English and also features American Sign Language interpretation. A recording with Spanish interpretation will also be available shortly. So the Creative Experiences program. This wraps up our first section of our presentation, and I'll now be giving you all an overview of the program. Next slide. Great. So the Creative Experiences program provides grants to organizations, including schools, to fund festivals, projects, residencies, and other cultural activities in the arts, humanities, and sciences. This program combines festivals and projects and creative projects for schools into a single program. It aims to support activities incorporating the arts, sciences, and humanities, where people can engage with creativity, discover and express their voices, explore the natural world, and connect to their history and community. Next slide. The Creative Experiences program is designed following the evaluation of our funding across the sector and is in line with our racial equity plan. It is also linked to the Mass Cultural Council values expressed in the FY24 strategic plan. Mass Cultural Council values vision, creativity, and Mass Cultural Council believes that creativity is the key to solving many of society's concerns, and advancing this asset helps to make the Commonwealth a preeminent place in the nation for it to thrive. Mass Cultural Council serves the Commonwealth and all who live, work, visit, and play here by amplifying creativity, providing resources, expanded relationships, and championing transformational changes that maintain and grow a thriving creative and cultural ecosystem. Mass Cultural Council works to build a diverse and equitable creative and cultural sector in the Commonwealth, ensuring all who practice and participate in creative and cultural expression see themselves in it. Next slide. For this program, applicants may choose to apply for a single grant of either $2,500 or $5,000. So why both choices? We want to be mindful that experiences come in all different shapes and sizes. Some smaller projects may have a smaller budget and some may have a larger. The deadline to apply is April 30th, 2025. Notifications will be sent out in early September of this year. Eligible entities are organizations, and we will go into that later on. Eligible experiences will take place between July 1st, 2025 and June 30th of 2026. Next slide. Just went over a few dates, but here are some key dates that we want you to keep in mind. So March 4th, the application opened. March to April of 2025, we're holding our information session today. We're having ongoing office hours, and individual support is also available. So if you don't see an office hours session that you can attend, please feel free to contact us for that option. April 30th is the application deadline, and in September 2025, which later this year, applicants will be notified of our decision. And just wanted to note that contracting is a multi-step process. Payments could go out in October, November, or later. And for the final report, grantees will be expected to complete a simple final report describing the use of their grant funds by July 2026 for legislative, reporting, and advocacy purposes. Next slide. We have a number of opportunities for you to join our office hours, which are weekly small group sessions held to answer your questions about your proposed project or program. Summers will be dropping the link to those opportunities that live in our agency date site. Great, so now we will be discussing eligibility, and I'll be handing it over to my partner, Keelan.
Hello, everyone. Kaylin tuning in to talk about eligibility. So eligibility is intentionally broad. We want this to be open to many types of organizations. You can be a nonprofit, a for-profit, a town or municipal department, a school, or even an organization without a legal status, as long as you have an eligible fiscal agent. To hit on some of the eligibility frequently asked questions right up front, there is no minimum organization size or annual operating budget required. You don't have to have a 501c3. You can apply using a fiscal agent or a fiscal sponsor if your organization is unincorporated and doesn't have another legal status. Unfortunately, individuals, including those organized as single member LLCs, limited liability companies, or those organized as sole proprietorships, are not eligible to apply for this program, even if they were to use a fiscal agent. There are some other specific requirements depending on which of these entity types you are, and we will go through each of those now. So nonprofits are eligible to apply, and you do not need to have a 501c3, which is a federal designation that some but not all nonprofits apply for with the IRS. You will need to be registered to do business in Massachusetts. In almost all cases, that means that you will be listed in the Secretary of the Commonwealth's Business Entity Database, but you'll want to check your status with them before submitting an application because we can't fund organizations that have been dissolved or have had their status revoked. There are some cases where a Massachusetts organization is not in the SOC database, but is recognized by the IRS and registered with the Office of the Massachusetts Attorney General. That is also fine. If you don't know if this applies to you, there are databases where you can check your organization's registration, and my colleagues are dropping those into the chat. Okay, for-profits. Certain types of for-profits are eligible to apply. They also need to be organized or registered to do business in the Commonwealth, listed in the corporate division's business entity database, and they cannot be dissolved or revoked. Again, single member limited liability companies and sole proprietorships are not eligible for this program. Next two types are government entities and schools. Government entities or municipal departments are eligible to apply. So that could be a recreation department or a municipally run senior center, a public library, or a local cultural council that's doing its own programming. And schools are eligible to apply, whether they themselves are a government entity, a public school, or a for-profit or a nonprofit. You could fall into a number of different categories we've just discussed. But the school must be recognized by the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE, with a 2024-2025 DESE school ID. Okay, for this program, the last category is unincorporated organizations. An unincorporated organization is a group of people who've come together to pursue a common goal without forming a separate legal entity. These organizations are not recognized by the state to do business in Massachusetts, and they're not operated by a larger organization. So they're not a department of or a branch of some other nonprofit. These organizations must have a Massachusetts address. They must conduct 50% or more of their programming in Massachusetts, and they must have a eligible fiscal agent. A fiscal agent is an organization that agrees to act as the legal and contractual representative of the unincorporated group. They can provide a variety of services as part of that agreement. But the most important is that they maintain supervision over the funds, make sure that they're used for the purpose of the agreement. Eligible nonprofit fiscal agents must have active 501c3 status with the IRS and be registered to do business in Massachusetts. They don't have to be located in Massachusetts. The fiscal agent can also apply for their own funding through this program if they're eligible and if it's for a separate project. For the purpose of this program, the Massachusetts municipalities, so a Massachusetts city or town, could also serve as an applicant's fiscal agent. If you're using a fiscal agent, you won't be paid directly. The funding goes to the fiscal agent. They are the ones that complete the contract, send us all the paperwork, They receive the payment and then distribute it to you. There's a lot more on this in the FAQ, and you can always contact us with questions. Next slide. Okay. To support our equity goals, Mass Cultural Council has taken steps to ensure that we can fund as many organizations as possible. So on this slide, there is a chart that talks about funding from other Mass Cultural Council grant programs and how that affects your eligibility for the Creative Experiences program. If you're receiving funding from one of these specific other programs, you would not be eligible for a Creative Experiences grant in FY26. So those programs are organizations, the operating grants for organizations, Youth Reach, Gaming Mitigation Fund, and Cultural District Investment Grants. If you were funded in FY25, again, this current year that we're in now, in the festivals and projects or the creative projects for schools programs, you can apply again unless you were not able to do your project and have already been approved for an extension into FY26. Organizations currently receiving funding through the Cultural Investment Portfolio Program may be eligible for creative experiences, but only if FY25 is their last year of funding in the portfolio program, because that program's being phased out. Organizations can apply for both creative experiences and the operating grants for organizations program if they're eligible for both. That program is also open now, and the deadline to apply is April 17th. If an organization is awarded an operating grant, that grant takes precedence, it's larger, and they would not receive a creative experiences grant. Applications to the two programs are reviewed independently, and there's no guarantee of funding from either program, but you can apply for both if you are eligible for both. Okay, that was a lot, but on to the fun stuff. So what can you apply for? You can apply for an experience or activity that incorporates the arts, humanities, or sciences. And our agency has a fairly expansive definition of these terms. It's outlined in the program Frequently Asked Questions webpage. It does have to be something that contributes to the cultural vitality of Massachusetts as a whole by being publicly available or intentionally serving a specific portion of the general public, as opposed to benefiting any private individual or group. So, for the most part, your experience or activity needs to be something that is intended for and promoted to the general public, but we recognize that portions of the general public require specific accommodations to participate in creative experiences. For example, there are certain cultural preservation activities and celebrations that might not be appropriate for a public audience. Or you don't need to invite the whole town to your elementary school for the science fair. Activities for a specific K-12 classroom would be fine. Those are not necessarily appropriate for the general public, but those are still considered portions of the general public. So those would still be eligible. The majority of the programmatic activity has to take place between July 1 and June 30, 2026. So the grant can cover planning, but the public-facing experience piece has to happen during our grant year. If you are planning something that's taking place in the summer or before early September, you might be applying for something and the event might happen before you know if you're going to receive funding or not, because our timeline for this program, application deadline is April 30. We'll be making award notifications very end of August or beginning of September 2025. So if your event happens between July 1 and when we are making those announcements, you might have to do the event before knowing whether you're going to get the funding. And in that case, you would be paid retroactively for the work that you've done. But there is sort of a period where that's the case. The minimum project budget also has to be a minimum of either $2,500 or $5,000, whichever you choose to apply for. And that has to be in cash expenses. So that means actual dollars out the door that you anticipate spending, overhead and indirect costs. So, staff, et cetera, that is included in that budget minimum. We know that you need to pay staff or a portion of electricity, et cetera, for toilet paper for your site to make a project happen. That's absolutely fine, but it does not include in-kind expenses. So donated time or goods are not counted towards that minimum project requirement. Next slide. Okay. Eligible experiences have to take place in Massachusetts. Experiences that take place outside of Massachusetts, like an out-of-state field trip or touring performances, are not eligible, even if they're benefiting people from Massachusetts. That's a change from creative projects for schools. So field trips all still have to take place in Massachusetts. The experience needs to be accessible to people who are deaf or have a disability. And if you have questions about access specifically, we encourage you to review our organization's access policy or contact our colleague Charles Baldwin, who is also on this webinar today. You can ask questions about access in the Q&A feature, and he will do his best to respond to you. The experience cannot include activities that are inherently religious, but we do accept applications from religious organizations, absolutely. If they're doing primarily cultural events, such as a concert series, et cetera, you can always contact us if you have questions. It cannot be an event for a political candidate running for office. And then the experience or activity can't discriminate on the basis of race, gender, religious creed, color, national origin, ancestry, disability, age, gender identity, or sexual orientation. Handing it over to Amy to take the next couple of slides.
Hi, everyone. So now I'm just going to be talking about multiple, duplicate, and overlapping applications. This one application per applicant organization is just part of our commitment to funding more widely to reach more people and experiences across the state. There are some cases where applications might not be from the same exact applicant organization per se, but maybe the organizations are related closely to each other, or the applications might overlap in terms of the experience that they are applying for. So there are 4 examples of this, which are listed on the slide here, but I'm going to go into more detail in the later slides. Okay, so these are 2 examples of overlapping applicants. The first is an organization or school, and then a department or program of that organization or school. So I think, yeah, so this is basically like a parent organization and a child organization, like that type of relationship. And some examples of that include a university and the university theater department, a robotics club, and then an art club, maybe at the same high school, and then a museum and the museum's education department. So these different types of organizations would not be able to both apply. Another example of overlapping applicants is an organization slash school and a fundraising slash support organization of that organization slash school. So it might not be parent-child, but they might have very similar programming and support the same population. So an example of this would be an elementary school and its PTO, a library and its Friends of the Library Association, and a charter school and its foundation. So these two types of organizations cannot both apply. Oh, and then sorry, the point that I want you to take away from this slide is that please check with your organization or school to make sure that you're only submitting one application. For example, sometimes an art teacher or a science teacher both apply from the same school and they don't know. So best practice is to let someone like the principal or the grants office know that you're applying for this grant. We don't want anyone to put work into an application that doesn't get read because the applications are duplicate or overlapping. So make sure you communicate with your broader organization or parent organization. Okay, these are examples of overlapping applicants where it might not be the same exact organization applying. Oh, sorry, overlapping applications where it might not be the same exact organization applying, but two organizations are closely related. Two of the applications are closely related and overlapping populations would benefit from the same or different programming or experience, even if it's not the same organization or related organizations applying. So an example of overlapping applications is an organization slash school and a guest partner organization presenting at or with the organization. So an example of this is a music school doing an artist residency at a middle school, and then that same middle school applying for a science fair, an organization doing a wellness workshop at a senior center, and the senior center applying for a painting class. So the reason for this being that they would both benefit overlapping populations. And then a second example would be the organization or school and the organization participating in an organization's school or school's festival slash event. And that would be like a band and an artist collective applying for the same open studios event that they're both participating in, or multiple organizations participating in, say, like a music festival. They can't all send in applications for that same experience because that would be an overlapping application. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about our review process, which we do through funding priorities. So basically, like what happens next after you apply? So first, all applications will be reviewed by staff to verify eligibility, and we'll reach out to you if there are any questions about your application which would affect your eligibility. But I'm going to talk about funding priorities right now, which are different from eligibility guidelines that Kaylin just went through. Funding priorities are different because they are how we make our funding list. And if you don't meet any of the funding priorities that I will discuss in the next few slides, but you do meet other eligibility guidelines, you are still very welcome to apply. We just use the funding priorities to create a list of applications that we fund down until we run out of funding. Also, another note is that we don't know how many grants will be given through this program. The number of grants is dependent on the agency's FY26 state budget appropriation and our spending plan, which is expected to be approved by the Governing Council in August 2025. Okay, so the first set of priorities. These priorities are in line with our commitment to the cultural sector of Massachusetts. To be eligible, you only need to incorporate the arts, humanities, and sciences. But if your experience has a primary purpose where arts, humanities, and sciences are a large part or integral part of your mission or your activities, then please let us know in the application. There's going to be a section for that so that we can give you that priority point. A second point related to that is hiring and compensating Massachusetts artists, humanists, and scientists. This one's pretty straightforward. Just let us know in the application and your budget if you hire and compensate artists, humanists, or scientists from Massachusetts.
One little tip for schools especially, just check what your school or district's policies are for compensating outside individuals so that you can avoid any confusion later on. And if you're looking to work with an artist or organization, there's this awesome resource called Creative Ground, where you can search by profiles of artists or organizations based on different activities, disciplines, services, and languages. So if your experience currently does not meet that priority point of hiring and compensating an artist, this is a great place to start. Okay, so these priority points are part of our commitment to funding more people and experiences, including those that are new to our grant programs. So if you have not been funded in the past 3 fiscal years or ever, then you would receive a priority point for your application. Same for if you've only received a total of 2,500, such as one festivals and projects grant in the last 3 fiscal years, then you could also receive a priority point. Okay, these priority points have to do with access for low-income individuals and families. So if your organization participates in the program Card to Culture, you could receive a priority point for this. Or if your experience is free to the public, I'll go into what is considered free or not free when we do the application walkthrough, since I know some organizations use like sliding scales or pay what you can. Just hang tight for that. I'll point out the distinctions. And then please note that you only get the priority point for one of these. So if your organization participates in Card to Culture and the event is free, we will only count one of these priority factors. Okay, these priority points are aligned with our agency's racial equity plan. So organizations that self-identify as led by and serving Black, Indigenous, people of color will receive this priority point. If you think your organization is BIPOC centered according to our definition, then you can register for this the self-identification in the grant portal. If you've already filled out this form in the past, you're good for all foreseeable grant programs that use this, so no need to fill it out again. School applicants are a little different. Public schools will not need to fill this information out because we just use the demographic data from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. However, please note that private schools do not report this data to DESE. So even if the private school has a BIPOC majority student body, we don't have this in our system. So if you're a private school that considers itself BIPOC centered, according to our agency definition, then you are welcome to fill out the form to meet that priority point. Please note that the definitions of BIPOC centered organization is different than having BIPOC majority student demographics, according to DESE. So basically, if your school reports to DESE, we use that and not the form. And if they don't report to DESE, then you can try out the BIPOC-centered self-identification form. And you can find this form in the current opportunities section on the homepage of the grant portal. You'll get a couple of open-ended questions to answer, and you can reach out if you have any questions about that. If you are a private school, you might not see this automatically, so just shoot us an email at creativeexperiences@mass.gov, which we'll link later. And if because private schools won't see that automatically. Okay, finally, there's a list of priority communities, which are cities and towns below the state's median household income and below statewide education attainment. And you can see the full list, which will be linked in the chat. Okay, so that was a lot, but that's a good thing. So here's an overview of all the priority points again, and we'll have a chance to discuss more during the application walkthrough. And of course, you're always welcome to ask questions. And just a reminder, funding priorities are not the same. They're different from eligibility. So if you didn't meet any of these priority points, but you did meet the eligibility guidelines, then please feel free to still apply. Okay, so now we'll get a chance to talk about the application process and literally walk through the application with y'all. So these are just like the general steps, but I'll show you how to go to the our grants portal and show you where to find the Creative Experiences application on the homepage. And then we'll walk through the eligibility quiz, the purpose of which is to confirm eligibility for this grant program and make sure that you get the correct version of the application. But still, all applications will be reviewed by staff to verify eligibility. Okay. Mission food. So the login page looks like this. Organization. I'm gonna take 1 second to pull it up.
While Amy is pulling that up, I just wanted to answer a couple of questions we're seeing in the chat. One of the questions is about the $5,000 grant versus a $2,500 grant. The organization themselves, you all, whoever's applying, will choose which of those you want to apply for, and there's no advantage to choosing one over another. You select whichever better fits the scope of your project. We're not looking to fund a certain number at 5,000 or a certain number at 2,500. We will fund as many as we can until we run out of money. And I see it's back up on the screen, so we'll address the rest of the questions at the end of the presentation. Thanks, Amy.
Well, thanks for waiting. Okay, so your homepage will look like this. You can find the application and the BIPOC-centered form in current opportunities. And to apply to Creative Experiences, you can click Apply Now. It will ask for your organization's legal status. This is the eligibility quiz. So this is just checking your eligibility for the program. It's not really the start of the actual application yet. So you can look at these handy definitions that we provided up top. For the sake of this, I'm just going to walk through as a nonprofit organization, but all of these below are eligible. And if you are applying as an unincorporated organization with a fiscal agent, make sure that you select this so that you get the option to put a fiscal agent in your application. But for the sake of this, I'm going to say I'm a nonprofit organization. So these were the databases that Kaylin mentioned. In order to pay you, we need to be able to find you in these 3 databases. So, so the SSC website that it's referring to is going to look like this. And you can search your entity's name here. If you're not able to find yourself there, you might be in the AGO, the Office of the Attorney General, where you can also search for your profile there. And then finally, if you're applying as a school, make sure you select the school option. It will ask for your DESI ID to confirm that. And you can search the name of your school here. But all of the links are in the eligibility quiz, so you can check there. But that's what they look like. Okay, so I'm going to assume that I was able to find my organization in the SSC website. I'm going to say yes, it does take place in person or virtually in Massachusetts. And then I'm going to click Save Draft so that can refresh. And then it will give you this red link. If it's incorrect, if it doesn't show the organization profile that you have, or if it's blank, please select no and then provide us with the correct link or URL. But I'm going to say that yes, it was correct. Check eligibility. Okay, so I passed the eligibility quiz, and then I'm going to click proceed. Okay. So here it will just ask you to confirm some things about the applicant information that are very basic. So you can check off the boxes to confirm that they are correct or that you've contacted staff to update it. And to do that, you can just use the notes function on the side. So all of these things are just check to confirm. Yeah, so if you see any issues, make sure you let us know and we'll be able to update that for you. Okay, so this is the contract information that we'll need. We'll need two people to be able to, one person needs to have the legal authority to sign contracts. That's the contract authorized signatory. And that person also needs to be able to submit the necessary contract documents, such as the W-9 and the electronic funds transfer form, and then also sign the standard contract at the end. So these things will be emailed directly to the person that you put here should you get approved for grant funding. Make sure that you type in the correct email. All the dots and ats and numbers are there. The names are spelled correctly because that's an important email. And secondly, we'll need the contract authorized officer. And this is the person who has the legal authority to attest that the above person, signatory, can sign contracts. There's some examples of who that person might be here. And this has to be a different person than the signatory. So please make sure that the signatory and the officer have two different names and they have two different emails because it cannot be the same person. These have to be two different people. And again, just make sure the name and the email are correct because that's important information to get you guys paid. Okay, so after that fun stuff, we go on to information about your experience that you are applying for. So first, you'll just be asked for the name of your experience. This is what will appear in the contract. So please enter it exactly how you want it to appear in a legal document. So yeah, maybe no crazy emojis or no crazy capital letters, just a simple name of the experience. And then you'll be asked about the discipline. Just try to select the one that matches best. It might not fit exactly, but we just use this for reporting purposes. It has no bearing on funding decision. So just do your best to select the discipline and the type that fit your experience the best possible. And then, yes, you'll be asked, does one or more of the following statements describe your organization? And this just helps us determine multiple, duplicate, or overlapping applications. So if you do click yes, you can search for the name of that organization below. If you don't find it, you can select no and provide the name yourself, but hopefully you do find it. And then these will ask for the dates of your experience. And this is just to check eligibility for your experience to make sure it falls within the dates that we said. And then you'll be asked for a detailed description. So again, we don't really look at the quality of the grant writing per se, but we just want to know like what your experience is about and just try to give us a good idea of what you're applying for so that we can understand it better. And then you'll be asked how your project incorporates arts, humanities, and sciences, who the intended audience is, how many people do you estimate will benefit. It's okay if you don't know exactly, just an estimate is fine. For example, if it's a school project, you could say the third graders of this art class or this middle school. And then these are the steps you'll take to ensure the project is accessible to people who are deaf or have a disability. And there's information here if you want to learn more about our access policy or contact Charles Baldwin. And then this is optional, but if you have any web pages or links or URLs to your experience, feel free to provide them, or any uploads to posters, etc. But these are not required. They don't it's okay if you don't have these things. You won't be negatively impacted. Okay, and then now the budget section. So like Timothy mentioned, you can select either of these grant amounts. Make sure that you meet the minimum for either of the grant amounts that you select. And then here's how you can include budget items. And you can put in the dollar amount here, but just make sure that the dollar amount, again, reaches the minimum so that you can proceed in the application, because it'll stop you if you don't. And then please note here any projected income that you expect for this experience. And we're almost at the end. These are the prioritization factors. So again, these are how we conduct the review and make funding decisions. So if you're hiring and compensating an artist, you can select yes, and you can tell us a little bit more about what that means. Make sure you also include it in your budget, just a line item for salaries or fees. Yeah, just tell us a little bit more about who the artist is maybe, or how much they're being paid. Context definitely helps, but it can be short or sweet just to get the point across. Yeah, and then this is about the primary purpose of the experience. So if the experience is in the mission or activities largely focused on arts, humanities, and sciences, then you can select yes. And then you can just describe a little bit more about why you think that is or what that means. Again, just do your best to communicate yourself. We're not looking for very fancy writing or a lot of, just do your best to explain. And then again, if you selected no for any of these things, that's totally fine. You just won't get those priority points, but you are definitely still eligible if you meet the other eligibility guidelines. Okay, so for this one, this is about where your experience will take place. So make sure you select the place that the experience will be, not where the organization is based. For example, if you have a Boston organization, but your experience takes place in Mattapan, put Mattapan. The only difference is that if you are a school and you should put the schools, city or town here. Even if the school is taking like a field trip to a nearby town or a different city, please put the location of the school, because that's how we'll be conducting that priority point review. And just tell us a little bit more about the venue or the place if you have that information. And these, the funding history, the BIPOC-centered self-identification, and Cards and Culture, Those are all auto-filled, so you don't need to worry about putting in any of that yourself. This one, the BIPOC centered, will be updated if you haven't completed the form yet, but you choose to. It'll just be updated automatically. And yeah, if you see any issues with this, let us know. But Grant Portal is pretty reliable. And then finally, is your project or festival entirely free to participants? So free, you can select yes if, for example, it's completely free to be admitted and you're only charging for food or vendor goods once you get inside, or if there's a suggested donation or a sliding scale model, but the sliding scale includes the $0 option, and those are included as yes for free. You can select no if you have to pay to get in or to participate. For example, you might get free entry to the fairgrounds, but there might be a fee to attend the events or performances that would not be considered free. If the sliding scale does not include $0 or pay what you can, or there's a pay what you can, or it's only free to certain populations, such as those under 18, those would not be considered free to all participants. And then finally, this one's easy, you just check it off. If you agree that all the information looks good and you agree to these terms. And make sure you click, if you're not done, you can click Save Draft. Make sure you click Submit. Don't forget to click Submit if you're ready to go for it. We don't want any applications to be lost in the drafts. Okay, so hope that was helpful. Just a reminder that we have ongoing support, so our support does not end here at info session. We have office hours every week, and you're welcome to email or call us. And then make sure you're signed up for our newsletter and the blog for more resources. And yeah, we're just very happy to help out applicants and put their best foot forward for this application. And I think we'll go to the live Q&A right now.
Thank you, Amy. We do have a few more questions. I know we have 4 minutes left. Amy, this is a question. Is eligibility determined by school level or district level DESI data?
Is eligibility determined by, is it for BIPOC majority school or eligibility to apply? I don't know.
Eligibility.
Okay, yeah, so all schools that are found in the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education database, if they have an SEID, then they are eligible. So this will include like pre-K through 12 public, private, and charter schools in Massachusetts. But the best way to check is to check in that DESI database to see if your school has a DESI ID.
Okay. Yes. And then if you do have more questions about that, again, our email address was dropped in the chat. So please email us with your questions. Another question that people have been asking was that if their experience incorporates a lot of different components like workshops, walking trails, for example, is that allowed? Is an experience allowed to incorporate many I guess, activations or programming? And the answer is yes. So this program funds, again, anything that does take place between July 1st of 2025 and June 30th of 2026. So if you're doing a history exhibition with different components, that is totally fine. Again, we would ask that you take a look at, the eligibility requirements. You can always come to one of our office hours and we can talk further about eligibility, specifically about the experience that you want to put forward. Let's see. I just wanted to ask my team, is there anything else that we wanted to talk about in the last minute or so? No? Okay, well, we are at time. I know there are a few more questions. I know our team is working to respond to them, but thank you so much for joining, and we really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much to our interpreters and our team and our live captioner. And again, we're here. So please let us know if you do need anything. All right. Thank you.